Hi, everyone. My name is Celia Monroe, and I am the marketing manager for Hachette Academic, and I'm really excited to welcome you all here for our first year experience webinar and author event. Today, you're going to be hearing from three of our amazing authors whose books are our top picks for first year experience and common reading programs. But just before we get started, I'm going to give you a quick overview of our program and the work that I do as a marketing manager for Hachette Academic, and just make sure that you walk away with everything you need to reach out and get in touch with us and work with us. So Hachette Academic is a part of Hachette Book Group, which essentially means that I work across all our books that are published under Hachette and our various imprints. And specifically, I work with universities to get our books in the hands of students and educators like yourselves. So one of my main focuses is working with FYE faculty, and I just want to make sure I introduce myself as kind of the main point of contact for any of you if you want to reach out. We do have a bunch of resources for you to use, which I've compiled into one PDF, which you should see a link for on your screen. I really encourage you to click on this and read through it throughout the event. Make sure you read it, save it, reference it later, because this is going to include all the information about our program. It includes useful links and contact information. It includes our digital catalog, which has all of our recommended FYE titles. It has our website and our social media, our newsletter, basically everything that you need to stay connected with us and to get updates about our future events and projects. I also want to highlight in that PDF, there's a page for each of the books that you're going to hear about today so that you have all that information. And as a little surprise gift for everyone, we also have links for ebook access to all three of the books through NetGalley. So make sure you are able to use those. You can also share those with your faculty and committee members just so that you can review those books for your program. Also, if you need physical copies of the books, we have a way for you to request those as well with an online form. So if you want those physical copies for you and your committee members, just make sure you fill out our form. It's really easy to use. You just need to submit your name, university information, program information. Just a quick note on that, The Water Remembers, which is the first book we're going to be talking about today, you won't be able to request a physical copy of until the book publishes, which fortunately is on October 28th. So it won't be long until you can, just a couple of weeks, and then you could also request a physical copy. But again, you'll have the ebook access if you want to look through that immediately. So just a final highlight, we also work very closely with our Hachette Speakers Bureau team. So if you want to bring these authors or any of our other Hachette authors to your campus for a keynote, a lecture series, any other event that you're doing on campus, please feel free to reach out to them, or again, you can reach out to me and I will connect you directly with them. We're going to get started in a little bit. Just a quick note, we are going to have a little bit of time at the end just for questions for us. There won't be time for questions for authors, but if you do have questions for us about our program, please feel free to pop those in the chat. Our team is going to be answering those throughout the event. And then again, there's going to be a little space at the end to address any concerns. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Julie Hernandez, who's going to introduce our first author. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the event.
Good afternoon. I'm Julie Hernandez. I'm the Executive Director of Sales and Academic Library Marketing at Hachette. John Warner is a writer, speaker, and curriculum developer. He's the former editor of McSweeney's Internet Tendency. He's the author of the books Why They Can't Write and The Writer's Practice. As the Biblioracle, Warner is a weekly columnist at the Chicago Tribune and writes the newsletter The Biblioracle Recommends. He is also a strategic advisor for the Franken Stories writing game. And here to introduce us, to tell us more about his forthcoming book, More Than Words, is John Warner.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you guys today. I've been spending a lot of the last 18 months going to many schools and colleges and universities across the country talking about issues around artificial intelligence and writing and teaching and learning. And one of the things I've been noticing is that people have a lot of uncertainty about what we should be doing in this time. And so I wrote this book, More Than Words. Might as well go ahead and put the slides up at headquarters. I wrote this book, More Than Words, really as an exercise in trying to wrestle with what truly matters in terms of writing, teaching, learning, work, life, et cetera, in a world where this technology exists. And this is work that I've been thinking about since long before ChatGPT showed up. I have a 20-year past career teaching college writing, primarily first-year writing. And so the questions of what students should be doing while they're in college have been preoccupying me for quite some time. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Those of you who work in higher education probably saw this story when it came out last spring in New York Magazine. If your friends are like mine, you had like 6 people text it to you and say, "Have you seen this thing?" And indeed, I already had. In fact, I spoke to the author of the article for about 90 minutes before the article came out when he was doing its research. If you read it, you might notice that I was not quoted in the article because I had a different take than the headline in the article of everybody's cheating their way through college. Clearly, some students are using this to outsource, using the tools of large language models like ChatGPT to outsource their learning to AI chatbot. But it's certainly not all students. I speak to literally dozens of students a week, and their attitudes around this technology are as varied as individuals are about any other topic. That said, some students are doing this, and the temptation to do it is pretty constant. And students are hugely conflicted about it. And I think we can help them deal with some of those conflicts by talking forthrightly about them. Next slide, please. At the root of this, the issue is not AI or the existence of AI and the problems that we're dealing with in higher education institutions long predate AI. What we have is a system where an education is viewed as a transaction. You'll see that image I have on there. That's from the Georgetown University Center on Education in the Workforce, which spends millions of dollars to tell students what they should major in for their educations to pay off. And if you look closely at that image, you'll see a fairly narrow notion of what an education is. A young man dressed like a character out of the 1950s in a sweater and some slacks puts giant coins into the university machine, exits with a cap and gown and huge stacks of cash. This is a pretty limited idea of what an education is, particularly a university education. And the system of what I call indefinite future reward, where everything is done not for the experience itself, but for its future payoff, is something that I've witnessed going back easily 20 years. In a previous book of mine, Why They Can't Write, Killing the Five-Paragraph Essay on Other Necessities, I tell the story of a student of mine at Clemson University in 2005 who exhibited these attitudes very clearly in a literature class. And so I know students want to learn, but the system incentivizes doing school. And this is a problem because it creates what we see in the next slide. Next slide, please. A kind of customer relationship with the institution and their educations. This is from a survey Inside Higher Ed did in the spring. They do it every year. But what the survey revealed is that more than half of students see themselves as customers in the classroom. And those of you who have taught or work in higher education institutions know that this is a very narrow identity and not something that is useful to students or helpful to students in terms of their long-term well-being. So next slide, please. What I propose is that we stop treating education like a transaction that can be fulfilled by the outputs of a large language model, and instead have conversations around the experiences that attach to learning, to replace that transaction with experience. And the book is designed to foster those conversations where we can start with some of the fundamental things like what is different between a large language model's outputs and what happens when we write, and those things are very, very different. What are the ethical and moral dimensions of using this sort of technology? These are topics that are almost at the top of the list of the students that I speak to at the various places that I go. Um, we should be talking about what the future looks like, even though the future is unknown. What are the sort of capacities we can build for the future? I have some thoughts about that coming up. And also a conversation about what students want for themselves. A transactional system doesn't really allow space for that. A system that's rooted in experiences, on the other hand, puts those sorts of things at the center. Next slide, please. So one of the core messages in More Than Words is that only humans write. Only we have sensory experiences that are encoded through our memories that we can recall, that we can build upon as we do different things. Much of my own work of writing is built fundamentally on my work teaching, where those experiences have informed the kinds of things that I think students need to do. The other thing that I try to emphasize is that every human is a unique intelligence. And the writing that students should do should honor that to some degree. Even the writing in school, there's no fundamental disconnect between writing in academic or scholarly contexts and removing ourselves as unique intelligence. In fact, outside of school contexts, this is what is valued. And that we don't value that in school is one of the things that helps create this transactional model that students have absorbed, internalized, and that we want to break them out of. And I think one of the ways to break them out of this is to have conversations about the world as we know it to be. Next slide, please. So writing is both thinking and feeling, right? Writing is the act of writing is inextricable from thinking, and folks here who are in education know this because while you're writing, you're not only trying to capture an idea. Often, that idea is altering. It's taking a new shape based on the cognition that's happening while you write. This is a kind of profound, uniquely human experience that unfortunately in my 20 years of teaching college writing, students often had not experienced before they got to college. There's all kinds of reasons for that, which I talk about in a previous book, but they should know this. This is something that should be introduced to them prior to college, or at the very least, very early on, so that they can take this knowledge with them as they move throughout their lives while they're in college. That thinking is part of what creates these unique intelligences that allow us to experience the world, that shapes our values, and that connects us to others. Ultimately, when we're on a college campus, we are part of a community. And these communities become meaningful in deeply enduring ways. And the ability to sort of read and write and take this stuff in, I think, is central to that. Next slide, please. So one of the talking points we were asked to address for these is what we talk about with students, and this is what I talk about with students when I go to campuses and wherever I go. I often talk to faculty, right? I'm talking to faculty about how I think we can still manage to teach writing with the existence of this technology. But I also require every place to give me audiences with students, and this is what we talk about: how to answer these eternal questions. Who am I, and how do I do this? And this is do an assignment, pass a course, get a degree, but it's also this, everything, life. And education, learning can and should be central to these things. I know it was for me, even as a kind of very mediocre student, as I talk about in the book. But these are the things we should be talking about, these kind of root values that I think inform the work we do. Next slide, please. So this material covers a huge portion of the book, but really it's an argument. The book is an argument for sometimes passionate, maybe even unhinged argument for the virtues of these sorts of experiences, of focus, of self-direction, of what I call presence, which is being aware of what's happening to you at the time you're experiencing it. Like when you're at a concert and you see everybody have sort of their phones and they're watching like a concert through their phones. I want students to watch the concert through their eyes, not through the lens of sort of a future recording. Taste is something students should be developing in terms of deciding what is it they like, why do they like this, what's meaningful to them about it. We should be signaling to students that life is an experience, not a transaction. And reading and writing, which help develop what I call discernment, that this ability to sort of take in information from the world, to sort true from false, good from bad, meaningful from not. These are fundamental. And if students can engage in this kind of experience and articulate their views to themselves through writing or thinking or some kind of combination of those, and then to the world and others, I really think we're looking at helping students bring different mindsets to all of the work they're going to do in college. So when it comes time, ultimately the use of a large language model is a demand side problem. We cannot police it. We cannot prevent it. But we can have students in a fundamentally different frame of mind when it's their time to make the choice to engage or to outsource, and make the choice to engage, not because they're going to get in trouble if they don't, not for some future indefinite benefit, but for the present. The idea of being involved and invested in their own lives. Next slide, please. So my message to students, it's sort of corny. I mean, sometimes my first year college students, like in first year writing, would look at me funny when I would say, quite literally, that their first year writing course was the key to a life of fulfillment and happiness, because I firmly believed that the ability to kind of think and write about our own lives is just a kind of core human function. Um, so this is what I think we should be doing when we learn. These are the messages that I think we can and should convey to students. And I'd be honored and happy to come to any of your institutions, or even just talk with any of you over Zoom sometime about these issues. Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure to be included in this. And if you have any questions for me offline, I'm sure these folks can hook you up, but I'm very easy to find online too if you need me.
Thank you, John. That was great. We're going to pivot a little bit. One of our authors having technical difficulties. I think up next, we're going to have Dr. Natalie Nixon. Known as the creativity whisperer to the C-suite, Natalie Nixon, PhD, helps corporate leaders achieve transformative business results by applying wonder and rigor to their work. In 2021, her firm, Figure Eight Thinking, was named one of the top 20 women-led innovation firms by Core 77. As a popular, increasing in-demand keynote speaker, Natalie's accessible advice on creativity and the future of work and innovation has landed her on the top 50 keynote speakers in the world, the list for 2022 by Real Leaders. And here to tell us more about her upcoming book, Move, Think, Rest, is Dr. Nixon.
Hi, thank you. Awesome. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Wonderful to listen in to what John was sharing. And I want to start by just hopping right in and sharing my deck. So if we could see the first page of my deck, and I'll go through those slides. Thank you. So I've developed a presentation for everyone really to convey the belief that my book, Move, Think, Rest, Redefining Productivity and Our Relationship with Time, absolutely belongs on your college, university's first year experience reading list. Next slide, please. And it's because we are in the midst of the imagination era. Next slide. And because of that, thinking differently is absolutely your students' strategic advantage, not just an advantage on the emotional and social side, which absolutely is, but it will be increasingly a strategic differentiator And the contents in my book will help to build that pathway. Next slide, please. So a little bit about who I am before I get into the meat of the matter. Next slide. As I mentioned already, I'm Dr. Natalie Nixon. I'm the author of 2 books and the editor of one. I wrote a book called The Creativity Leap, which came out in 2020. And this is a book about why creativity is not a nice to have, but a must have. And my most recent book, Move, Think, Rest, is what we're focusing on today. I also, in my former life as a university professor, edited a book on design thinking. I also am a lifelong dancer. I've been studying ballroom dance consistently for 5 years, and I'm a new devotee to open water swimming, and that will be relevant, as I think you'll see as the conversation progresses. Next slide, please. And just to close the loop on it, I just want to give you kind of a bird's eye view of the arc of my work and life to date. So I'm from Philly, the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. I studied cultural anthropology and Africana studies at Vassar College. I studied abroad in Brazil, which really was the beginning of my lifelong curiosity for different cultures around the world. I was a middle school English teacher in my 20s, which was arguably the best preparation I've had for everything I've gone on to do. I also worked in the fashion industry, first as an entrepreneurial hat designer, and then for division of the limited brands. I've been really fortunate to live abroad, not only in Brazil, but also Israel, Germany, Sri Lanka, and Portugal. I got tired of being in different time zones from family and friends, and was given an opportunity to become an assistant professor at Thomas Jefferson University when it was Philadelphia University. And I was a professor for 16 years. I first taught the business of fashion, and then I was the founding director of a strategic design MBA program. I earned my PhD in design management while working full-time in 4 years, and it was a pivotal accomplishment. I've given now actually 4 TEDx talks. I just gave my first one in 10 years last week in the Berkshires. And I pivoted away from academia to build figure eight thinking in 2017. Next slide, please. I enjoy still to this day working with young people. This is just a snapshot of me going back to my alma mater, Vassar College, to participate in the Sophomore Career Connections. I've been a board member of Leadership in Design, which focuses on secondary education. And I'm also a board member of the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum and really interested in the role of education and design. Next slide. So I'm not telling you a lot that you don't know, but I just wanted to build some scaffolding. Today's college students are really navigating a significant crisis of overwhelm and under connection. Next slide. And just to ground that in some data, a 2025 survey found that 46% of Gen Z individuals are reporting having received a formal mental health diagnosis. Next slide. And among Gen Z young adults, 44% report persistent feelings of anxiety and feeling a bit on the edge. Next slide. And in a survey of current college students, 73% say that their school feels overwhelming. And this has a direct impact on the continuity of learning in your work because it causes a lot of leaves of absence. Next slide. So what I wanted to just couch this conversation in is mental health, which has become more normalized, thankfully, because of Gen Z. But also this reality that the students have started equating busyness with success, and they are not the same. And my book really helps to level set and provide an operating system, a human-centered operating system, to help them figure out a new way to think about what is success and what is productivity. Next slide. There's a really interesting survey by Wiley, where it's reported that a lot of students perceive busy work in isolation as symptomatic of a culture that rewards volume over focus. That's a nice way of saying it's kind of our fault that they are perceiving work in this way. We're not modeling the best behaviors. Next slide. And so the headline that I want you all to take away is that we are actually in the middle of a human revolution, not a tech revolution. And I've written a book that will help equip young people with a way to navigate forward, leaning into what makes them uniquely human. Next slide. So there's two shifts in outcomes by reading this book. One shift is that students will find practical ways to shift away from an alternative to burnout, to building skills for workforce resilience and adaptability. And they will also be able to shift away from the constant feelings of pressure and busyness to developing a growth mindset, excuse me, Carol Dweck's growth mindset concept, creativity, and strategic focus. And I neglected to mention, as a creativity strategist, a lot of my work is to help individuals and teams and organizations realize that creativity is not a nice to have, it is a must have, and it is part of our birthright as humans. And it is something that I've built tools and work to help people build creativity as a capacity. Next slide, please. So Move, Think, Rest is going to be significant for the first year college experience because it will help your first year students design their own learning rhythms, not just manage time, right? Not just do time boxing and figure out how to fit in studies with going to classes and exercise, but really being attuned to their own learning rhythms. So it's a lot of self-inquiry that it really cultivates. Next slide. And this is what the Move, Think, Rest human operating system is in a nutshell. When I talk about movement, I'm really talking about movement hygiene, not just exercise, but really integrating movement throughout the day. When I talk about thought, I'm not just talking about rational thought and cognition, but the value of backcasting and forecasting. So backcasting is about reflection, the role of memory, metacognition. Forecasting is about dreaming, inspiration, curiosity. And rest is not just only about taking naps and getting your sleep, but it's about intermittent rest and the role of breaks and looping all of these three dimensions together to understand how our brain really functions at its optimal best when we integrate this framework. And it also is an alternative to the first industrial revolution model version of productivity, where it's a both and model. We value slow as well as fast. We value the solo practitioner and the collective. And we understand that there's a lot happening, not just on the visible plane, but when we step away, when we sleep on it, when we let things marinate. Next slide. So the top 4 themes I would say from the book are as follows. The book will Move, Think, Rest will help your students, your peers, redefine productivity through the lens of balance, not busyness. It will really center emotional recovery as a pillar of well-being and productivity. A lot of times when we think about productivity, we only talk about mental resilience and the importance of physical health, right? Those are important, but the role of emotional recovery is also significant. It also really emphasizes that curiosity and creativity are learnable competencies. And then it offers a human-centered time management process within this digital age. I should also mention that every single chapter ends with reflection questions and exercises for the individual, for the team, and if you and your colleagues want to explore it, for the entire organization. Next slide, please. So if you were to invite me to give a campus keynote or be a presenter at one of your orientations, here's how I would lean into structure. I'm always open to co-creating these experiences, but I really would want it to be interactive. So we would really introduce something called question storming to help students learn to think in questions, which will get to the thinking part. Some movement exercise, nothing embarrassing or getting people too far out of their comfort zone, but it's part of my background as a lifelong dancer, but to really center this in embodied creativity, make it simple, make it accessible. I would also integrate some reflection practices that students could take forward on their own. That really emphasize micro resting for mental clarity. And the call to action is to help your students be more curious than certain. Next slide, please. So the reason why I'm finding that Move, Think, Rest is resonating with students, since the book launched on September 2nd, I've been invited to share it at Villanova University, at Babson College, at Thomas Jefferson University, at the College of New Jersey, just to name a few. this is not just with students, with staff as well and faculty as well, but this is a book that meets students where they are. It will help to support group discussion. It offers prompts for reflective writing, and it really is a nice support tool for any wellness programming at your college or university. And very importantly, it builds a shared language. MTR, move, think, rest, I pronounce as motor. And so you can begin to all anchor in on a shared way of thinking about this very different operating system to be productive. Next slide, please. So what I want you to take away, as this is where the plane lands, is that the future, in my opinion, belongs to the imaginative, it belongs to the restored, and it belongs to the creative. And if we are to do nothing else in this tech saturated world with ubiquitous technology, new rules for work, and unprecedented burnout, as I've already demonstrated, we need to lean into what makes us uniquely human, and move, think, rest is one step in that direction. And I would relish and cherish the opportunity to be invited to share this book, to see it adopted in your first year experience curriculum, to be at one of your signature events. Next slide, please. And that's all for me. Thank you so much. If you want to scan this QR code, it's one way to stay in touch with me, but also I've provided my email and my cell phone. And I thank you so much for the opportunity to share. I look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Nixon. That was inspiring. Thanks for being here with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, and I'm introducing Amy Bowers Cordalis. She's a mother, fisherwoman, attorney, and a member of the former General Council of the Yurok tribe, the largest tribe in California, formerly a staff attorney at the Native American Rights Fund. She is also currently the co-founder and co-director of the Ridges to Rifles Conservation Indigenous Group, a nonprofit representing Native American tribes in natural and cultural resource matters, where she works on advancing tribal sovereignty, water rights, fisheries, and the undamming of the Klamath River. She is also the recipient of the UN's highest environmental honor, Champion of the World Laureate, and has been named to the second annual Time 100 Climate List, featuring the 100 most influential leaders driving business to real climate action. And here to tell us more about her book, The Water Remembers, is Amy Bowers Cordalis.
Ayakui, Nek Now, Amy Bowers Cordalis, Nuwak Rekwoid, Numite Wa, Wak Lao, Wak Lao, Wak Lao. Well, that was a wild ride. I was having technical difficulties, and despite my own inabilities on tech, I was able to solve it. So thank you, everyone, for pivoting, and thank you to the other speakers for stepping in while I address those issues. It is an absolute honor to be here with all of you today. I am so thankful for the opportunity to share my book and a bit about my story and my family's story with you all. So I think what I'll start with, and let's see, we should get the PowerPoint going. I think that's on your, oh, there we go. Wonderful. Okay, we'll get the first slide up. There is my book. So the book is a memoir about my family's intergenerational fight to save our Yurok way of life and the Klamath River that led to the largest river restoration project in history. Next slide. And while the book is nonfiction, it is written in the sort of tone and theme of almost a novel. It's my invitation to readers to join us here on the Klamath River. This is the mouth of the Klamath River, and you can see how it goes up through the mountains there. The Klamath River is, and I think maybe go to the next slide, please. The Klamath River straddles California and Oregon, and you can see kind of in the middle of this image here, the Oregon and California borders. And the last slide we saw was the mouth of the river. And so the book is an invitation to readers to join me here on the river bar in this area while I tell you a story about multiple generations of my family's fight to save our way of life. Now, I think that readers and first-year students will enjoy the book because, first off, it's fun. It's an interesting read. It's got guts. It's got glory. It has explosion. And I think for readers and for people entering college, we're bombarded with so much academic text that it's refreshing to have a story, just a story that is powerful and uplifting. And I think The Water Remembers can be that for people. It's also a coming of age story, and it's relatable to college kids in part because it starts with me in college. The book takes place at the very beginning with me coming back to the Klamath and coming back to my family's ancestral home right there at the mouth of the river in the village of Requoy. And I'm there for a summer internship with the Yurok Tribe's Fisheries Department. And my job is to be on the river every single day, right there at the mouth of the river, right where it says Yurok country on this particular slide, and count the amount of fish that Yurok tribal members harvest, the amount of salmon. And then a few months in, tragedy strikes. About 70,000 adult salmon die on the Klamath River at the lower part of the Yurok Reservation, or on the Yurok Reservation, in what was the largest fish kill in American history. And it was caused by poor water management, basically water being diverted for agriculture at the decision of the then Vice President Dick Cheney, which causes water levels at the bottom of the river to fall to the lowest in history on the river. And salmon, just as they were returning home, are met with terrible conditions, and a fish disease spread through the entire run and killed them. For Yurok people, we are a fishing people. We are, everything we do to this day revolves around salmon fishing on the Klamath River. We were never relocated during colonization, and so we've been able to maintain our fishing way of life, our connection to river, to land, to species. And so for those salmon to die was really an act of ecocide against my people. And so I have a moment, which I share in the book, where I'm witnessing the dead salmon, and their bodies are layered 3 to 4 layers deep on the bounds of the Klamath River. And it smells like war. It smells like death. I mean, just imagine the carcasses of 70,000 salmon rotting. And I had this existential experience. I had an out-of-body experience where my great-grandmother, who had passed away, it was probably 20 years before, really felt like she moved through me and told me that I needed to continue our family's fight. And so that's what I decided to do. And I became a lawyer, and all of this came about. I was a junior in college. I thought I was going to go and be a singer, and then that whole moment happened. And so I completely pivoted, graduated from college, went to law school, and started the fight. So the book chronicles that, but also in part 2, and please go to the next slide, it steps back into history to about 110 years before. And it starts with this place. So this is my 4th great-grandfather, Billy Brooks, standing in front of the house of Layuk. This is my family's ancestral home. This is a redwood plank Yurok home, which is right in the village of Requoy. And this is where my great-grandmother, Geneva Matz, who had come to me that day in the boat, was raised. And please go to the next slide. This is her. This is her when she was about 10 years old. And she lived a very Yurok Aboriginal or she had a very Yurok Aboriginal upbringing. So she was born in 1904, and this picture was taken probably about 1914, 1912. But she was raised by Billy Brooks in the house of Leuk, living a very Yurok way of life, speaking Yurok, gathering, hunting, fishing, learning all of the, the language, just learning the values. And so through the book, I take readers through parts of her upbringing and really try to ground us in Yurok values of how to live in balance with the natural world, and how humans, our appropriate role is to be stewards of the natural world. So we are a part of nature. We're not separate. We are a part of nature, and our job is to live in balance with it. And what that means is you can still, rely on salmon, on redwood planks for housing, for deer, or on deer and elk and, seafood, all of the things. But you need to do it in balance so that you aren't taking too much and harming the regeneration of that species. So we learn about that. And then things get a little rough. So Geneva, is about to go and start her training as a medicine woman when she is stolen by federal agents and taken to boarding school. And so she goes up to boarding school and manages to make her way home. And right around that time, she starts her own family. And then the state of California adopts a law that makes it illegal for Yurok people to fish on the Klamath River. And this is essentially like making breathing illegal. And so it launches her into a lifetime of fighting and pushing back against the state's illegal intrusion. And the book goes into sort of the heart and soul about Yurok Aboriginal rights and how our rights, and it talks about this too, how I think it was my sixth great uncles and grandfather signed a treaty with the US government that was never ratified. But instead, the Yurok reservation was created by an executive order. And in doing that, we, as our family of Yurok people, reserved our Aboriginal rights to hunt, to fish, to be on the water, to be on the land, and that those rights are the supreme law of the land. So if there was ever a conflict between state or federal law, the federal laws, the Aboriginal rights that we reserved should have controlled. And so that is why Geneva and her family and my family fought back against the state's intrusion. Can you go to the next slide? And the second part of the book continues. Oh, that's not the right. One more, please. There should be a picture of, there we go. Okay, and we'll go back to that one. So the book talks about how for almost 100 years, my family, along with this wonderful human, my great Uncle Ray, who passed away a few years ago, but how he fought back to uphold Yurok rights. He was arrested 20 times by the state of California's game wardens just for fishing, just for trying to feed his family on his ancestral home waters in his ancestral fishing holes. And so the book goes into great detail about the brutality that he and my other family members experienced at the hands of the game wardens there. And that whole part of the book is really it's told in story. And so you go through these experiences with Uncle Ray, and I hope if I did my job right and writing the book right, you're actually feeling, you're feeling the beatings, you're feeling the intensity rising. And can you go back? Well, actually, let me say this. So in 1973, after his 19th arrest, he pushed his case through to the Supreme Court. And in Matz versus Arnett, the Supreme Court confirmed that the Yurok reservation was still Indian country, and that meant that we still had our Aboriginal fishing rights and could continue to live our fishing way of life. And you would have thought that was enough, right? Because the Supreme Court, it's the highest court in the land, right? Well, no. Then the federal government came in, and can you go back to that last slide, please? And put a full moratorium on all Yurok fishing. And as a result, the Yurok people, and this was about 1978, 79, did what we called fish protests. And it launched us into what we call the Salmon Wars. And to basically enforce the moratorium, the federal government sent out a full federal riot team. So federal marshals with riot gear, and you can see in this picture here where they have their helmets and they had machine guns and large metal boats. And this is a picture of my great grandma and my grandma out on the water in our traditional fishing hole, just fighting back. They're just fishing. And you can tell, I mean, it's kind of atrocious, but there's this really powerful story where my great grandma, and she was about 4'9", and she's the one sitting in the back of the boat. She was about 76 years old at this moment. And so this is the same picture, or the same person of that little girl we saw at the beginning of the presentation. She stands up in the boat and she started singing a Yurok song. And then something phenomenal happened. And I'm kind of not sure if I should tell you all because it's a pretty good thing. It's a spoiler alert, but I will. So she starts singing this song, and birds from all over come above the boat and start circling around them, and they're diving down and they're crying out and they're making noise, and it's hundreds and hundreds of birds. And the federal marshals get so freaked out that they leave and they never come back again. Never come back again. And so right around that time, we transition into, well, let me make another point about all of this. So, this is the era of time, like the 30s, 1930s through really the 1980s, where the rest of the country, you think about the 1960s, the 1970s, is experiencing the civil rights movement. And it is not commonly known history how Indian country, so how indigenous communities responded to the civil rights movement. But pictures like this, the story that I tell in The Water Remembers, is an example of the indigenous community's response to the civil rights movement, where we fought back, in violent, brutal protests to protect our treaty rights, to protect our Aboriginal rights, and we were beat. We were illegally arrested, but we kept fighting. And so I am really honored to be able to share that family story and that common indigenous experience in this book. And I think one of the things that is so valuable about this book, and I'll kind of make this point about it in the third part of the book as well, but one of the reasons this is so important is because this history is not yet a part of the common knowledge that we all have as humans. It's still largely untold. And so having, first year college students, giving them access to these kinds of stories has the potential of completely changing history and rewriting it in a way that for once is accurate. And inclusive of the diversity of stories and experience and fights and heart and soul that we have had in the United States. And so I feel really honored to be able to uplift this story. And I would, be over the moon thrilled if more folks got to read it through this program. So then going back to the book, we get into the third part of the story. And so once we secured the rights to be on the river, to continue to fish, our rights to land, our rights to fish, our rights to water are confirmed, just about then the colonial impacts of the development of the Klamath Basin start to really hit hard. So next slide, please. Right around the next slide. Here we go. So then in the 20th century or the 21st century, the biggest threat to the river and our way of life are these four, and I won't call them buttes, I'll call them ugly dams that basically were built in the middle part of the Klamath River between 1911 and 1962, and they were built without any salmon passage. And so the Klamath, thanks to the leadership of the indigenous peoples, the stewardship under the indigenous peoples in the Klamath Basin, and the abundance of the basin, the Klamath salmon runs historically were the third largest in the whole lower continental U.S. And then these dams were built without fish ladders, and they basically made it so that Iron Gate Dam, which is the dam on the top left, was the highest point that salmon could get up the river. And what this dam did was block salmon from accessing over 400 miles of spawning habitat. The other things that the dams did is that they basically, you can see here, and go to the next slide, behind these dams, next slide, please. Yeah, behind these dams, there were reservoirs, and every single year there were toxic blue-green algae blooms that turned the water into this, right? And then that water would run down the Klamath River and would pollute it beyond measure. You couldn't swim in it, you couldn't fish in it. If your dog got into it, it would kill your dog. And by about the 2000s, just before the fish kill happened, the salmon were so hurting. The river was so sick that only 1% to 3% of the salmon runs were left. And so after the fish kill, and this is where the book starts in 2003, this is where the part 3 of the book starts, is we launched a movement to undam the Klamath River. Next slide. And that in the book, I talk about, and there's the fish kill. And I know we're running out of time. So next slide, please. So that launched this whole movement to undam the Klamath River. So Warren Buffett's companies owned the dams, and groups of indigenous leaders, the Yurok tribe, the Hupa tribe, led a movement to undam the Klamath River. Next slide. That led to the historic agreement. It was a $515 million settlement agreement to remove the dams. And what is beautiful about that agreement is that it equally valued the rights of nature, the rights of indigenous peoples, and business. And it was led mostly by indigenous peoples. And I had the great honor of representing, I'm a lawyer, I represented the Yurok tribe through this process. And the thing that I learned is when you empower your people, when you empower local voices and you educate them about how to talk to regulators, how to talk to business people, how to community organize, and then when you strategically work together in partnership over decades, you can create massive change. And I'm going to jump through a few slides here. Can you go to the next one? I'm really proud to report, keep going, that in 2024, so just last year, we removed all 4 dams. Now the river looks like this. Next slide. So it is the largest river restoration project in history. Through the project, we are restoring over 20,000 acres of land through a multi-million-dollar restoration project that my nonprofit, the Ridges to Riffles Indigenous Conservation Group, is leading and putting indigenous peoples in the driver's seat of that project. We have planted over 19 billion native seeds and are literally renewing the world. Now salmon have already returned past the former dam sites up into Oregon. Thousands and thousands and thousands of salmon have come home, and they are spawning. The river is fiercer and better quality water, colder water, stronger than I have ever seen it in my lifetime. And so, I think the big I hope that, well, and so the book sort of concludes with this huge victory, right? Like, we won. We took on Warren Buffett, and we won. And I think the book itself and this story that spans, generations of a family, and how every family or every generation took its role and kept the fight up, and then expanded partnerships, working with all kinds of people, state, federal agents, NGOs, other tribes. It really just shows that if you work together, what you do really matters, and that you can change things. And also that nature-based solutions can be or are a scalable climate crisis solution, and that we don't have to accept that the world is going to end and we all have to move to Mars. No, we can work to rebuild ecosystems. We can still be capitalists. We can still uplift Indigenous rights, and that the future is bright. I think the story itself is really the antidote to the current climate crisis. And so I think, readers coming into their first year of college and reading this story, it will give them hope. It will give them hope that, continue your education, follow that, like guidance that I hope I can help inspire people to get your college degree, to, go on to a graduate degree, whatever it might be you need. And that what you do matters. I was just an Indigenous girl I was the second person in my family to go to college, but I made a difference. And so can they. And also through the book, there's really a model for how you can create wide-scale change. And so they can learn about that too. And then the final closing remark really is that deep in our bones, we have ancestral knowledge about what it was like to live on a healthy planet. And the water remembers what it was like to be healthy. It remembers where it used to go. The river remembers, the salmon remember. And so when we work together, and when we unify under that common value, which you learn in the book, of balance and humans as being a part of nature, we really can fix the world and renew the world. So it's a story of hope. And I would be honored to be able to come and share this story. I've been able to talk about this at various speaking engagements. And what I'll say is people cry. They feel this deep in their bones, and they cry. I also love to play. We have a video clip of explosions of the dams. And so it's also really fun and interesting. So I would be honored to be a part of your university community, invited as a speaker. I'd be honored to have my book be included. And I just am so thankful for this opportunity. Walk loud.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy, for that really inspiring story. And thank you so much, John and Natalie, as well, for your presentations. And I just want to say a few closing remarks. I know we started a little late, and now we've gone over a little more, but thank you so much, everyone, for coming to the event. Just a quick reminder that the links for all of the digital ebook galleys are in the chat, as well as our contact information, fye@hbgusa.com. Please use that to reach out to me, and we will also be following up and circulating the rest of those resources that we have for you, our digital catalog and all of our website information. Thank you so much again for coming, and I really hope you all enjoyed the event and that we get to speak soon. Thank you so much.